Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Thank you to Agnes and Andrea for the opportunity to speak to you. And it's my pleasure to talk to you about our Stop Saying Sorry topic this afternoon. And we already know that women apologise too much. Anyone relate to that? Yeah. And the research that I've done around it indicates that it has to do with our conditioning. And as we tend to apologise more as females than men do, I would say that it's a pretty good bet that that conditioning is our female conditioning. Would you agree? Yes. So, one more question. For those of you who do over apologise, find themselves over apologising, do you know why? Maybe you haven't even thought of it. Lack of confidence. Thank you. So I want to talk to you today about not so much the over apologising, which is really just the tip of the iceberg, but what's underneath it, and that is the lack of confidence, the low self-esteem, and really, in some cases, being a walking apology, not just what comes out of our mouth. And I'd really like to start that with sharing a little bit about my story and how I came to be someone talking about this topic and why it interests me. And I'm just going to make sure this one works too? Yes. So I'm going to start not too long ago, and that was my my menopause. So menopause is kind of like the thing nobody really wants to talk about, but I've found that it's been one of the most exciting times of my life, and it was also extremely difficult. Oh, look at the faces. Yeah, let me explain. It was also extremely difficult. Now, I'm a naturopath and have been this year 30 years a naturopath, and so, you know, I was one of those women, and it's not just naturopaths, but other women as well, especially those who think or pride themselves on being healthy. I thought I would sail through menopause because in our culture, menopause is a disease. Our medical profession labels it decline and decay, the beginning of. There's a lovely, right? And it's not the medical profession's fault. Oh, actually it is, if I give you the history of how that came about, which was basically the discovery of HRT, which is a whole different lecture. Where was I? We got distracted. The narrative around menopause is that it is the beginning of the end. And my talk really today isn't just about menopause, because that's what I specialise in my clinic, but in what's behind why women experience so many hormonal issues, stress issues, health issues that go back deeper and deeper than to just what we eat and the exercise that we're doing or not doing. So my menopause was, I kind of got to my late 30s, and I'd been this fairly rat-baggy adult. You know, I know that I'm saying this in public, but I shoplifted, I left jobs before I should have and bailed on things. I was really I call it rat bag because it's kind of teenage behaviour. And I stayed that way well into my 30s. And by the time I got to my 30s, I'd travelled all over the world. I'd climbed the Himalayas. I'd ditched several boyfriends. I'd just about done everything. Well, lots of things. I hadn't done drugs, so there's one thing. Just a little bit of just a little bit of pot occasionally. I do actually would like. Anyway, no. So I got to my late 30s, and it all started to crash because I'd done this really stupid thing. I was living in Canberra. I was consulting in the training and development industry, and my friend was going overseas. She'd met this guy who had a boat, and they were going to sail from Hawaii to around the world. And I went, well, I'm up for that. So within 3 weeks, I moved out of my house, got rid of my cat, ditched my job, and was on my way to Hawaii. Now, the fact that I'm super, super sensitive to seasickness never really occurred to me at the time. But anyway, within 3 weeks, I was back. It didn't work out. And I had this moment of, what do I do now? I can't just keep running away. I'm running away from something. And I recognized it because I was 38 or something like that. I had no keys, no car, no man, nothing, no debt, no, And I thought, I'm 39, the biological clock starts kicking in, really late. And what am I going to do? And so I made my 40s. I set my goal for my 40s to really be about what I thought were the important things for me to create. And that was, I wanted to get married. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to have my own home, which I'd never had. And I wanted a business. I wanted my own business. So my whole 40s were really about creating that. And I got closer, in my early 40s, we started to try and I met the man. We started to try and get pregnant. I ended up having great difficulty with that because by the time you hit 42, 43, your chances are, pretty slim. But I spent that whole decade trying to do what I thought was what was supposed to make me happy, especially at that time of life and especially as a woman. Because I really didn't know. I didn't know myself well enough to know what I really wanted. I just thought, well, I've been doing what I wanted all around the world and I'm here at this age and I don't feel fulfilled. And so I'll try the other way. Anyway, I did get pregnant. It was through IVF and through an egg donor. And I remember being ecstatic. It was in South Africa. I had to go. It was a horrible story, another lecture. But the system in Australia is draconian and really, really heartbreaking. So I ended up going to South Africa for a donor because my mum's Dutch and there are lots of Dutch people over there and it seemed like a good idea. So I came back pregnant and within a few weeks, I started to get sick. And there's something called hyperemesis. Some of you might know. It just means, emesis means vomiting, hyper means lots of, and then gravidarum just means while you're pregnant. So I had that, and apparently it's quite common, and apparently it's fatal and life-threatening in many cases. We have modern medicine now. Modern medicine is good for a few things, but it didn't really work for me. So after I was getting to about 3 months, and I was skin and bones. I couldn't drink, let alone eat. I hadn't been to the bathroom, I think it was about 14 days at one point, because I wasn't eating anything. And so, and this has been a sort of a guilty thing for me ever since, but I had this realization that I was dying. I knew I was dying, but everything in my head was saying, oh, you're just given up, you're just, you haven't done everything, all that messaging that we get as women, that we don't try hard enough, we don't do enough, we're not enough, and all that kind of stuff came up. Anyway, I was in a really high-pressured job at the time with a boss who wasn't that sympathetic, and she really embodied this sort of masculinized woman that I didn't particularly relate to. So, and my partner at the time, we're spoiler alert, we're engaged, but my partner at the time was in underpaid job because he'd had a life crisis, that happens in your 40s and 50s, and ended up in a kind of transition interim job, which was retail, which was very low paid. So I knew that if I didn't work, that we would be screwed. So I had all this real pressure on me, and I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker, to the point where I could barely drive to work. I was so afraid that I wouldn't be able to lift my leg to hit the brake. And I'd go to the supermarket and I couldn't make any decisions. I was so afraid. I was really, really afraid that I couldn't remember my PIN number because my memory just went. I had no taste, so the taste buds, I know anyone who's had COVID, apparently that's a very common symptom. Everything I ate tasted literally like cardboard. And so I had to make the extremely traumatic, challenging, awful decision at 4.5 months to terminate. And I was 50. So I went fairly quickly into menopause, which by then, I was no way I was going to try again, because people would say, why don't you try again? And even though I kind of looked young for my age, it was like, I am never, ever going through that, ever again. That was terrible. So I was at 50. Remember I said at 40 that I would do all these things. I had none of them. And I tried really, really hard. And so when I was recovering, or in that grief process after the baby, I it's just that grief, bereft, despairing, not sure what to do. And I remember in that moment going, God, Goddess, universe, whatever there is, whatever you believe, whatever's up there. For me, it was universe. I can't do this. I've tried to run my life for 20, 30 years, and it's not working. I suck at this. And so I said, it's over to you now. And I made the decision to not make any decisions, including leaving my job. So I threw myself into my job. Like, I would get there 7:30 in the morning, I'd work till 6. I was sacrificing my health, my relationship and everything to try and make this work. Because I thought, okay, I'm too scared to do anything else. At least I've got a job. I'll make my career about being executive in a company. And by the end of that year, I had a performance review that went very badly. So to me, I knew that it was on the cards, that this was going to be at some point the end of a working relationship. Even that was extremely difficult, because I was still vulnerable, I was still weak, still trying to recover. It was only a year later. But there were 3 really, really powerful things that opened up for me in that time that have led me to be where I am now and to have made everything that I've been through worth it. The first one was, I noticed on a friend's blog this conference called, not the Women's with Attitude conference, I don't think it was around back then, but the Wise Women's Gathering. So I went out to Wiseman's Ferry, to the Wise Women's Gathering, and it was, it was hippies and bare feet and kids running around and because I was corporate, right? Even though I have a hippie heart, I was this corporate health trainer, naturopath person. And I found this woman called Jane Hardwick Collins, and she talked about menopause as a rite of passage. And I thought, I need to go to that, because I'm about that at that time of my life. Anyway, she blew my mind. She talked about the power of women, the power of menopause as a rite of passage, and that rites of passage are moving from one status, a reproductive woman, through this liminal phase, which is confusion and transition and all that stuff that we typically associate with menopause, and into the next phase, which in traditional cultures was the wise woman phase. I learned about this. I learned how we were connected to the seasons. I learned that the period is connected to the seasons, that the energy of your period is winter, the energy of your ovulation is summer, and there was so much that I didn't know. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. I've got to learn this stuff. And so I went deep diving into goddess mythology, croneism, wise women, all that kind of stuff. It absolutely brought me to life. The second thing that came along, I accidentally went to what I thought was a a business seminar in Melbourne because I happened to be down there teaching, and it turned out to be the art of feminine presence. And the art of feminine presence is really taking meditation and bringing that into everyday moments. So I'm doing it now. I've done it just prior to here because I was nervous, and it's really about applying meditation practices and presence work to do your own healing, your own embodiment. And then that rocked my world because I realized that being invisible and being nervous and being a self-doubter and having low self-esteem and being intimidated by masculinized bosses wasn't my future. It didn't have to be that way. What was missing for me was presence. And then the third thing, these came along all in quick succession without me really forcing it or anything like that. The third thing that came along was yin yoga. I was already a yoga teacher, but I hadn't discovered yin yoga. And yin yoga is something that teaches you concepts that are absolutely brilliant for women. It's not just the concept of yin, which we might know from Chinese philosophy, yin and yang and so on, but the qualities of yin that we have forgotten, that us westernized, yang-ized women, in a Western culture, in a patriarchal culture, that we've kind of left behind because we think that we need to be a certain way in order to be successful. So I learned these things about yielding, about meeting your edge, about working through discomfort, about being comfortable with being uncomfortable, about not backing off when you're uncomfortable. And it just also blew my mind, and it also brought in this sensuality into my life that I'd also been missing. And particularly when you hit menopause and the sexy stuff, you're not really interested in that so much anymore. Like Mia was talking about the male gaze. With estrogen out of the picture and the testosterone out of the picture for men as you get older, that whole sexy thing diminishes, right? But I wanted to be sensual. I wanted to be embodied. I wanted to love my body. I wanted to love myself. Always had a challenge with my body because I had an eating disorder when I was a teenager. Another rite of passage that we don't value in our culture. How many girls, this is another side topic, and how many girls go into an eating disorder right when they should be honoured and celebrated and exonerated and all of that stuff for being a woman. It's changing slowly, but certainly in my case, those skinny models that she showed this morning, that's what I just wanted to be that, right? So I ended up getting unceremoniously squeezed out of my job, which I wasn't, in hindsight. Well, at the time, I think I was relieved. And the only thing I could do, I knew I was never going to work for anyone else again. And along the way, I'd practiced as a naturopath, and I'd studied so many extra things. I'd studied fertility and personal development and life coaching and aromatherapy. I was an aromatherapist and a yoga teacher, and I had all these skills. And I thought, I've just got to do something with this. So bang, I went and started my path to purpose, basically. And I loved what you were talking about this morning. I've forgotten your name just for the moment, about a business with purpose rather than a business for purpose rather than a business for profit. And that's definitely where I wanted to go. And it was definitely about empowering women, and it was definitely about empowering the midlife woman, because the absence of a voice for the midlife woman is that we have a lack of wisdom in our culture. And how much wisdom is missing in our culture at the moment. How much stuff is happening that is stupid. Sick children, sick and lonely old people, mothers with depression, and how much mental health. And my own little snippet of this, my own little, just remembering that I've actually got slides, my own little sliver of all this is to empower the voice of the midlife, menopausal, postmenopausal woman, so they can go out and be activists for what's right in the world. And we can do that through our wellness, because being well, not needing drugs, not needing to see doctors, not needing surgery as a first resort, at least, not buying all that crap that's in the supermarket. All those types of things are a feminist thing. They're a political statement. Where you spend your money is a political statement. And yet how many of us are educated and well informed about nutrition? Like, most of my job in clinic is teaching people about food, basics. So my whole mission then is really about that empowerment to make women unapologetically fierce, feminine, and fabulous. And I've been on this journey for 3.5 years now, since I left that job, to find my way to do that. And I have to say, I'm not quite there yet. I do one-to-one work, clinical work, and all of that messaging comes into what I do. And I'm about to launch my first program, just a mini program, to put my toe in the water, because transformation isn't just about knowledge. It isn't just about learning. It's about enacting. It's about going on a journey from one place to the other place. And that requires a facilitator, requires a mentor. And I see that as my role. So there are a lot of things that I look back and on my life now as I reflect and as I start to step into my Mia phase of my life. She's got such big plans and such vision, and I like many of you and like Women with Altitude, we really align with that empowerment message, elevating us all. I find myself still saying, I'm sorry. In fact, I was buying some shoes, I think these ones, and within about 3 minutes or 2 minutes, I'd said I'm sorry to the 19-year-old boy assistant. I'd said 3 times I'm sorry, and I realised, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Because once you start becoming aware of it, you start to try and stop it, right? And I have a handout for you that has, and Kirsten at the back is going to hand them out, that has some tips on what to say instead. I didn't really want to make my talk here about that, because I really think you already know it. It's just a little reminder. What I wanted to illustrate is the deepening aspects of why we over-apologise. And so I'm just going to briefly mention my little 9-week baby that's being born, because my business has now become my child. And that is empowered wellness. So empowered wellness is about the feminine aspects of being a woman and having women's health issues. It's about empowering the menopausal process. And it's about becoming empowered through becoming well. You can't be well with tired, burned out adrenals. You can't be well without excellent gut health, and you can't have excellent gut health if you're stressed all the time. And so my discovery is that wellness is a path to transformation. Wellness is a path to empowerment. And if you're not well, can I say the key messages, and I'm about to wrap up, the key messages that I want to bring you today, that you being well will change the world. That you being well is a political statement. I can't tell you, I don't want to go into it in detail, but I can't tell you how different the world would be if we were well. That being well, you need to connect to your feminine. Because when it comes to creating boundaries for yourself, when it comes to saying, no, I need to go for my run, you can take yourself to school, not if they're a toddler, of course. When it comes to being well, you need self-esteem. To have self-care, you need self-esteem. And then finally, being well is a long game. We must give up the quick fixes. We must not let ourselves be seduced by the 30-day 30 kilos, or not 30 kilos, but 10 pounds, or please, let's stop being seduced by those quick fixes and realize that true health, well-being, and holistic health and well-being, which is what I advocate, physical, emotional, spiritual, as well as intellectual, is a long game. Thank you. Ooh, questions. So there's obviously the app for following up. If you'd like to, I've also, if you would like I forgot to mention this. If you'd like my wellness manifesto, which I'm also rewriting into a Femifesto as well, just on the top of the page, you can write your name and email address, and I'd be happy to send that to you, and you just need to give that to me at some point this afternoon. But reach out and connect. And if you're in a similar industry, reach out and connect. So thank you for everyone. And I'll hand it over now because you want to allow people to move rooms and that kind of thing. So round of applause for Kirsten and her dodgy foot.
Well, I think we need another round of applause for you, actually. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So if anybody needs to move rooms, can I ask you to do so very quickly? But we will be moving on to Chandu Bickford very shortly.
Thank you, Kirsten. How's that sound? Is that okay? Great, perfect. I'm looking around, and because we were down in the other room earlier this morning, there's so many faces I actually haven't seen. So it's lovely. It's lovely to see everyone. I'm actually really excited to be in this room because although I can be very loud and quite gregarious, this afternoon we're actually going to do some more internal work and quiet work, and sort of having more of a smaller cave-like space can feel good. Welcome to the conference. My name's Chandu Bickford, and I didn't even prepare an intro about myself, so I'm not even going to bother with that because time is really valuable and we don't have too much this afternoon. Okay, so what I thought I'll do is I was getting into the accelerate theme. Yeah, I'm not really a car fanatic, but I was getting into the accelerate theme for this. So I know the red line very well in my own business and in my own life. So I'm just going to, who in the room drives a car? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Well, it's good to know because we do need to drive cars. Yeah. Anyone never driven a car but maybe driven a Dodgem or something like that okay. Alrighty. So today we're going to be following an in the car sort of theme as part of our Accelerate conference. Alrighty. And business can be a great vehicle, yeah, for looking at using our values, looking at combining our passion and our areas of expertise as well as our values. Okay. But sometimes we can actually find quite a lot of difficulty in getting traction or hitting potholes or anything. Alrighty. So let me see. What do you reckon, Tyson? Can I get something happening? Oh, hey, here we are. My business is really about change, and that's what I support people with, is moving through change and transition. Now, in my 20 years or so in business, every single thing I've studied, every person I've worked with, everything I've read says, whatever you do when you're advertising, don't mention the word change. Yeah? And the reason is because change feels scary, uncomfortable, terrifying. Yeah, definitely something we don't want to talk about. It definitely doesn't feel easy or like a problem-solving thing. Okay, so what I've discovered is that I will refuse to not use the word change in my advertising because coming back to, is it Brooke? Yes, what you were talking about in your advertising and the ideal client is I want people to know that if they're going to work with me, we're going to be working on change and transition. Yeah, I don't want people coming to me thinking that they might be getting something else. Yeah. So this is my cycle of change. Ideas are opportunity. We all get that. We get a bit excited. We get all passionate about, oh my gosh, there's this great thing coming. Then we come down to a small obstacle comes up. Someone hates the idea. We get scared of the idea. We don't have the resources. Freak out and overwhelm. Procrastination and putting things off. And then eventually, hopefully, finding some clarity and taking courageous steps forward. Does anybody recognise this cycle? Anybody find themselves in this cycle? Sometimes several times a day. Yeah, okay. No, seriously, think about it. Like the opportunity, you get an email from school, from the kids, or someone rings you, or a client comes in, and all of a sudden you've got this great opportunity, you get excited about it, but then the dog vomits on the carpet, or, this is the truth, yeah? Like this is really where we're at. Okay, so when it comes to this, facing this cycle of change, ultimately, we all have this happening in our lives all the time, yeah. And I know this territory particularly well when it comes to change, I guess. So 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I was a nurse, and I had a home and a husband and an art studio because that was what I did on the side. And then I started listening to my intuition, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And there was a little voice that turned up one day out of the blue, quite inconveniently, and sort of said, why don't you go to Africa? Oops. Oh, have I gone the wrong way? Yes, I think, Tyson, there's a thing happening for us here. Okay. Can I do it now? Am I still waiting? Here we are. So, this is me. I ended up thinking that it would be great to go overseas for 7 months. I didn't end up coming back to Australia for 12 years. Okay, so just a word of warning, no matter how good your spreadsheets are about what you're doing with your life, you may end up living in a mud hut in Africa with no electricity, carrying your water half a kilometre in a bucket from a tap that sometimes worked up in the village. And that's a really good day. That was when I'd had enough water for a bucket shower, not showing the bleeding calluses on the hands, and not really showing too many of the ribs from living on fresh air and mangoes. So sometimes our greatest ideas and our greatest moments of inspiration, are not as easy to move through in that cycle. Plenty of moments of terror, plenty of moments of fear, plenty of moments of what the bleep am I doing? Okay. 51 last week, the week before. Still having plenty of those moments, okay? But what I did learn when I was thrusting myself through these moments of ridiculous intuitive change, and really ridiculous intuitive change, okay, was that somehow and somewhere I would find a way to make it happen if I kept listening to that intuitive but inconvenient intuitive voice, okay? What I learned when I lived in that village, now we were about 8 hours bus ride, because we didn't have a car, from the main city. So coming down in a bus with the goats and the bowls of tamarind and all the rest of it, what I learned there was the art of business, the art of survival and working from business and working within the changes of our own lives. Yeah, following the seasons of our own lives, listening to what's going on and coming up. Needless to say, I didn't have a car if I didn't have water, okay? But it's interesting today, most of us do have cars and we are using those cars. But what I learned from this place was that business is a way of actually bringing our passions to life as well as making a livelihood, yeah, if that makes sense, yeah? So this was where I started my first business from, back in 1999, with a $1,000 investment from my father, and which I could have put into shelter, which would have been possibly more handy. But I started working with the local women who had these beautiful arts and crafts, working with them, building an opportunity for them. This was before fair trade was even mentioned. So I built this business from the dust. Didn't know a thing about business. I'd been a public servant. My parents had been public servants. Didn't know a thing. So I started this little business, came back to Australia, and then decided backwards, maybe I should start learning business. Long story short, studied, no MBA or university degree, by the way, but then moving between countries, straddling these ideas. Okay. A big journey. I'm not going to go into that journey today. But the idea is that business is a great vehicle for us to move forward. It's a great opportunity for us to take our passions, like the women in the village who didn't have the opportunities, yeah, I could take their opportunity, I could take their passions and turn it into opportunities for them, yeah. I don't do that business anymore. I've now been back in Australia for 12 years. Yeah. But thinking a little bit about what is it in our own business that drives us? What is it that brings our passion to that? And that's what we're going to be looking at today. You will need pens and papers, but not just yet. Okay. First up, we're going to have a little look. I'm going to try. No, wrong way. Okay. Here we are. So this is today's agenda. Okay. What turns our engine on? I've tried to keep it kind of family friendly. Okay. What triggers our break or abort response? You can do with it what you want, but I'm keeping it at a PG level for today. Okay. And what might help us accelerate away from the danger of procrastination and pitfalls and professional self-sabotage? Okay, so this is our agenda for today. But before we start, this is such a dangerous time of the afternoon. Someone who's been in front of groups and leading groups for years knows that this is a very, very dangerous time because people have got a bit of lunch happening, they've got a bit of digestion happening. Yeah. So normally under these circumstances, I would invite us all to get up and move around the room and I'd put some music on, but I'm going to do something even more dangerous. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and pop your feet on the floor and have a couple of breaths, okay? And you're going to need this because when we're working with our intuition and when we're trying to listen for our inner voices, we don't get that with all of the stimulus that's happening around us. We've had some amazing speakers today, we've had some amazing things going on, but the idea is to come back into ourselves, come back into the place. So just taking a breath in your own time and in your own way. Having a breath in. And when you're breathing in a sense of calm alertness. Not, I'm digesting my food, going to sleep. Yeah? Breathing in a sense of calm alertness. And as you're breathing out, just softening through your body anywhere where there's some tension or some stress, and just releasing that with your out breath. Breathing in a sense of calm alertness, and breathing out, just softening through your body, your face, neck, shoulders, right down to your feet. One more. Breathing in a sense of calm alertness, and then breathing out and just softening through your body. And then coming back into the room as a holistic mentor, facilitator and coach, I'm really mindful of the physical, the mental and the spiritual, the emotional side of us. We bring all of this to our work. Okay. And it's really important to be rested and focused before we go on a journey, and that's what we're about to do. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to invite you to do is close your eyes again and imagine that your business is a car. Whatever car you would love, just close your eyes and imagine that your business is a car. Now, driving requires many skills and knowledge, yeah? But it also needs us to respond quickly and to use our intuition and make fast decisions. Sometimes they're dramatic ones, okay? Now, we're not going to be out on the highway in this session, but just think about if you were out on the highway, what sort of car you'd be driving as your business. Okay. Alrighty. Now, as you're just imagining your car, I'm just going to say a few statements and I want you to feel in if any of these are actually true for you. Sometimes I feel like I'm driving with one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake. I move forward when I press the accelerator, but I'm not as fast or efficient as I would like to be. I move forward, but I wonder if I'm heading in the right direction. And then sometimes I end up on back roads, or I break down or get stuck in the same places again and again. Anyone recognise themselves in any of that? Yeah, can be really, really common. So coming back into the room. Okay, so today I'm going to end, this is not about me talking, this is about you working. Yeah, I could have stood up here and told you all about my amazing life, but that might definitely have sent you to sleep. So, no, it's actually pretty interesting. But I'm going to get you to do some work because this conference is about you, it's not about me. Alrighty. You're going to be writing. You're going to be writing quickly. Okay. There is no right or wrong answer. There is no second guessing what you write down first. Nothing is too weird. Okay. And there is no life or death. Okay. And you don't ever have to show this to anyone. You can eat it. You can flush it down the toilet. Okay. So before we get into the activity, the first thing is there is a disclaimer that despite the fact that I know everyone in this room has a level of brilliance that is just shocking, okay? This afternoon you don't have to be superheroes, yeah, or Marvel stars. You don't have to be a stunt driver, okay? So just keep it really simple. When I'm asking these questions, just go with what's really simple. Yeah, you don't have to come up with something really big. If something big comes up, fantastic, but not necessary. Alrighty. Most important thing, trust your gut, listen to what's there, get it down. Alrighty. Okay, so closing our eyes again. Oh, I know the danger's there, but keep closing your eyes, yeah. And revisit the image that you had of the business as a car. Come back to it. Closing your eyes, coming back, your business as the car. Now I want you to think about who's driving that car. Take a moment and imagine yourself behind the wheel. You're in the driver's seat and your passion is like the fuel. It's the vital form of energy. Now as you're driving that car, see yourself driving out on the open road. Imagine yourself steering your business like a car up that highway. Feel it moving powerfully forward. Feel it running smoothly and feel the momentum and the power of this as your business and the business vision coming to life. Whatever it is, doesn't have to be big, whatever it is. Now, while holding the vision and the feeling of this, I'm going to invite you to quickly jot down the answers to these questions. Here's our car. What are 4 things that you love about your work? 4 things I love about my work. Straight off the top of your head, not overthinking. Three things that drive me to succeed every day. And lastly, 4 responsibility I have that keep me striving and wanting to move forward. Okay. Now just take a moment and take a breath and just reflect on this information for a moment. Okay? Some of it might be new, some of it might be known. Now this is the sort of the big picture, yeah? But we all know that whatever sits on top, there's a whole lot sitting underneath. So what I'd like you just to think about is all the love and passion you've put into your business over the years. Think about all the responsibility you have had and you have still to keep it going. And I'm not just talking about in your business. There's just a huge amount of life admin and responsibility that we all have, whether we have children, parents, communities. Yeah, we've got really, really big levels of responsibility. So feel into that. Yeah. And then I'm going to invite you to feel into how tired you might be from that at times, or how heavy that might feel. Yeah? And sometimes we can get overwhelmed or bogged down. We can feel like we're stretched too thin. Anyone ever have those feelings every second-ish? Second? Yeah. So what I'm going to invite you to do right now is close your eyes again. You can pop your pens down for a moment. And just feel into that weight of the responsibility and the heaviness, feeling of being overwhelmed. Doesn't matter how great your business is, how amazing your family are, how many spreadsheets you can whiz out in 3 minutes, yeah? I want you just to pop it all down. It's time to rest. Just for a moment, just imagine with your out breath, just popping all the responsibilities just down for a moment. Yeah. And I want you to imagine yourself, you're back in that car and you're pulling the car over to the side of the road. It's hard driving all the time, no matter how capable or energetic we are. So pull the car over to the side of the road, stop it, undo your seatbelt and get out of that driver's seat. And then take a breath, imagine yourself having a stretch when you're out of the car. Walk around the vehicle, take in a bit of the scenery for a moment, and then come around and climb into the passenger seat. Now you can rest and let someone take over for a while. Keeping your eyes closed, I'm going to invite you to imagine another version of yourself climbing in behind the driver's seat. And this version of you is rested and clear and passionate about what they do and where they're going. You feel really comfortable about letting them take over because you know and admire their skills. You trust their judgment and you know they can handle the terrain. Feel the car pull back out onto the road and accelerate away. The road is smooth and empty, and you can rest and look out the window and relax. Just feel that seat supporting you. Feel yourself being carried for a little while. But as the drive continues, you begin to see things that are starting to distract this version of you, this driver. I want you to notice what's taking the attention away. What's distracting them? And then as the road winds on, this driver starts to become also a bit weary and more fatigued. Okay, and then grab your pens, staying with this quiet space inside, and just jotting down 3 things that are distracting the driver. Three things that are distracting the driver, and 3 things that are draining their energy or slowing them down or keep cropping up as barriers. Just really quickly jot them down. What's distracting them? What's draining their energy? What's taking them off course? Now with this, just remembering that you're a passenger or an observer here. Yeah? Have a look at what you've written down and just jot down if there's a first idea that might help them deal with these distractions. If there's an idea that comes to your head when you look at those distractions or what's draining their energy, just have a look at them. And is there something that pops into your brain as the passenger, as the observer, that says, why don't you try this? Remember not to overthink. There's no right or wrong answer. They're all just ideas. They can all be flushed. Alrighty, once you've done that, I'm going to invite you to just pop your pens down again. Remember, you can come back to this anytime, it's all there. The beauty of a short workshop means that you can have that feeling that, you know, when you get into the shower later on tonight, something's going to pop up, yeah? This is it. They're the shower ideas. They're the best ideas. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. So the invitation is to close your eyes again, because all of this is just moving through you. Yeah. Close your eyes again. Pop your pens down. Let those distractions go and the tiredness pass. You are still in the passenger seat. Yeah. And the car is moving through some beautiful scenery. Your favourite music is playing. Have a bit of time to relax and reflect. The information you've just explored is swimming through your mind, but it's not worrying you. It's just sort of passing by like the scenery outside, like that landscape on the side of the road. So let yourself relax, and as you do, recall the passion you had for your business and the vision for what you still want to create. Vision is vital. When you get into that car, you've got to know where you're going. Yeah. So you know the journey, and now you know the distractions and dangers more clearly. And yes, of course, they're going to keep cropping up in day-to-day life. But because you're rested in this moment and you've identified some of them, you'll be able to deal with them more easily in the future. So feel now into what it is that you need to re-energize yourself so you can continue with the journey. What will rekindle your passion and refuel your tank to keep you driving this vision into being? And just feel into that. And then when you've got that, just jot down 3 things. 3 things that you can do to bring more refreshment, rest, and relaxation into your life so that you can be a better driver and a safer driver on the road. 3 things. Keep it really simple. And then just think about and perhaps write down how you would love to feel next time you jump behind the wheel of your car or a car. Yeah? How would you love to feel before you start your next leg of your journey? Because you do get a choice. And then every time you see a car or you slide into your own car seat and you're putting that buckle on, take a moment to remember and re-energize this feeling. Yeah? Our business journeys are long and they require quite a lot of stamina and skill. Looking after ourselves and listening to our inner intuitive voices and our own wisdom is actually vital in helping us move forward and to keep progressing. When we care for ourselves, we care for others. And establishing regular pit stops, services and maintenance can help us move with that. They not only mean that we get to where we want to go when we need to get there, but it also means that we get to enjoy those long Sunday drives, which is what we all do it for in the meantime. And so thank you for everyone. Enjoy the next leg of your journey, and as we would say in Swahili, safari njema. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chandu. That was fantastic. If anybody wants to move rooms, please do so very quickly. And just a reminder, if you're wanting to read these wonderful speakers' bios, they are all on your app if you want to log into that. So in just a second, we will introduce Ingrid Cucchi. Ladies, there's seats along the side if you want to join in. And just also a reminder that these, all the presentations are being recorded and will be available for you to watch on the online app till the end of March. So that information will get sent out. Okay, let's get started. I'd like to introduce Ingrid Cucchi at Cucchi. Sorry, I'm sorry. Ingrid Cucchi, The Art of Success, What Female Business Leaders Need to Know and Embody Every Day. Please welcome.
The trick will be using this machine. 405,000 women in Australia every night at risk of homelessness over the age of 45. So who here is over the age of 45? Put your hands up. Ladies, in real terms, if you're between 45 and 65, that equates to about 10% of us. And if you're between 55 and 65 and you're renting, you're not earning a full income and you're living alone, your risk of homelessness increases to 65%. And another home truth the ABS would like to tell us is that in the next 20 years, they expect that lone women households to increase between 30 and 60%. So we all know we're living longer. But the question I've started to ponder is, are we aging well? And I don't know if these statistics make you feel a little uncomfortable. Feel free to squirm in your seat if they do. And you might be wondering why I'm starting with such scary statistics today. And I'm not remembering to move my slide forward. I don't know about you, but it burns me up. It burns me up that 405,000 women is 405,000 too many. It burns me up because I know the face of this potential homelessness. It's my cousin who, for all intensive purposes, grew up just like me, is well educated, twice married, twice divorced, 4 kids, chose to stay at home and raise her children when they went through school. When her second marriage ended and she needed to find a job, get back into the workforce, hundreds of applications later and 3 years, and she finally got a job that would sustain her. But she still pays 45% of her income in rent. And my first awareness of this issue came from an Insight episode a few years back. And what I guess struck me most about that episode is that Jenny Brockie asked a version of the same question to each woman. And every woman had a version of the same answer. Her question was, I feel like I'm going to trip over. Try not to. Did you ever think about what might happen if? What might happen if your husband passed away or you and your husband split up? What might happen if you got sick and couldn't go back to work? What might happen if you had children that needed care or a parent that needed care and you couldn't work? And almost universally, in one way, shape or form or the other, the women all answered the same thing. I'm not really sure how it came to this. I thought everything would be okay. Now, the downside of living longer, obviously, is that retirement isn't like our parents knew, and the pension is not a living wage. And the thing with what we do in life, and Mia talked about it a little bit earlier, is we just do life. We get busy, and probably most of us feel at some time like life is doing us. We get caught up in the nitty-gritty, we roll with the punches, we get back up again, and we're great at bootstrapping and coming up with ideas on the fly. But it doesn't actually help us in the long run. We also do this thing called intermittent planning. And that I term is when we get excited, when something happens in our life and we get really excited and we make a plan and we make a goal. We might have changed jobs, it might be something not so good, and we all get excited about this plan, and then life happens again. and those plans get further and further behind us. If you are 45 now, you already have a life expectancy of 95. And maybe you want to be an old-fashioned kind of gal and you think you might live, or you might want to work till you're 65. My question to you is, have you thought about the 30 years between 65 and 95? More to the point, have you thought about the 20 years between now and 65? So, I don't want you to become a statistic, ladies. So, it's time to start living intentionally and reimagine your future. And that's what my message is all ostensibly about. And it's come about, I guess, as part of the journey I have walked. I feel very blessed these days. At the moment, I feel like I'm well and truly on my journey. I've found my path. I wouldn't say I've reached my highest potential, but I'm on my way. I have choice in the way I spend my time. But it wasn't always like this. Actually, I have choice in the way I spend my time. I do want to make this other point. I know my milestones. Now, that might sound a little bit odd to you, but if you work with me, milestones is something we talk about a fair bit. What are your milestones in the next 20 years that are important in your life? I know when both my grandchildren start school, because then I'll get let off the hook for 1 day a week that I'm currently looking after them. And whilst I love and adore my grandchildren, it makes a dent in my week. I know that my husband has 521 days till he retires. Why do I know that? He tells me every day. Because he plans on buying a yacht and sailing the Mediterranean. Sometimes I think with or without me. Not so sure. But anyway, it wasn't always like this. Back at the end of 2013, I was probably on the verge of a nervous breakdown, although I don't know that I recognised it at the time. I was working 70 to 80 hours a week. My marriage was on the rocks, to say the least. My mum had bowel cancer, and I had a baby brother who turned up on my step who had gotten caught up in ice and become a drug addict, lost his job, lost his home, and wanted me to take him in. And at that moment in time, I remember feeling just a little bit like I might start to drown, but being the big sister and the strong person in the family, I just threw another ball up in the air and threw a few more balls in the air and kept going. But if I thought 2013 was, at the end of 2013, life was pretty bad, I was not prepared for 2014. 2014 was my worst year ever. I hope it's my first and only worst year ever. My mum, despite smiling every day through her cancer journey, passed away in April of that year. And then 2 months later, my baby brother also passed away unexpectedly. To say that for the first time ever in my life, I understood what people had said to me when they felt like they were on a precipice or on a cliff top and they might fall over the edge, is a bit of an understatement at the time. And then I found myself sitting across the desk from my doctor. Would have helped if I'd put my timer on, wouldn't it? There we go. And then that was probably... So then I found myself sitting across from my doctor. The only year that came close to that was back 17 years earlier, when my first marriage broke down, when I, for the first time ever, realised I had no idea what I wanted out of life, when I thought getting married was it. And I found myself a single mum stuck, had no idea what I wanted to do or even where to start. And it was about the time that personal development became a bit of a thing. It was just starting around about then. And I found this course at the School of Philosophy in Brisbane. And I decided that that might be where I might find the answers I was looking for. Fast forward 25 years later, and all the life experience I bring to what I do, all the countless glasses of wine I've had with girlfriends talking about life and what's good, bad and ugly about it, some of the research I've done, some of the research I've read, has all brought me to the place that I am today and the place that I want to share, the things that I want to share with you. So I've done this infographic. And ladies, I hope you're pretty impressed with this because I certainly am. Yeah. The only thing that this infographic does not show, though, is the potholes along the journey of this road and the amount of times you'll redo some of them. But we all know that that happens, don't we? So anyway, just to give you another statistic before I go on, how many business owners here make business plans? How many of you make business goals? Yeah, perhaps all of us should. So, and 80% of us, according to some of these statistics, don't keep track of the business goals. So even if you put your hand up and said you have business goals, who keeps track of them? Okay, that's good. 40% of us who write our goals down, and this is probably me sometimes, never check them again. And the other statistic that I guess really strikes me at the heart is more about women more generally. And that is 43% of women across a number of different surveys that I looked at have said that they don't feel like they're thriving in their job or in their business. 43% of us. So we have a few arts to master, ladies. The first one is the art of intention. And that's all about what is your why. And you'll have heard that from a few of the speakers today. You've probably heard it from the million courses that you've done like I have over time. But it is really important to focus on that why. And what I've found over time is you need to keep refining it. So firstly, what is your big why? What is the reason that you exist on this planet to give back? The other element to why is what's your selfish why? What's the why that, what do you get out of giving back to other people? Is it that yacht in the Mediterranean? Is it a Tesla? Don't know. And the other element of the art of intention is who you are. And somebody's talked about that a bit earlier this morning. What is important about who you are is where you've come from. So, is where you've come from. So it's about your history and your past and acknowledging the things that have happened to you along the way and really being able to take the gold that's there in a way that helps drive you forward and brings out who you are uniquely as a person. So then we have the art of alignment. And this is all about visioning your why. It's about really nailing clarity of what you've decided your why is and where you want to head in life. It's about internalizing it, and it's about being able to create a vision out there. What does your end game look like? Can you see it? Can you touch it? Can you smell it? Can you feel it? The third art is the art of conviction. And this is a really important one for small business owners. And I think Brooke talked earlier this morning about how important it is to sort of speak about what you do. But what do you believe in? What do you believe in enough to speak up about and share your ideas? And how do you connect that to your business? The fourth art is the art of agility. And agility is a bit of a buzzword at the moment, and it's used a lot in IT spaces. But for me, agility is about being able to reflect on the past. It's about being curious with everything going on around you. It's about lifelong learning. Don't ever give up lifelong learning, ladies. It's about cultivating those mindsets, a growth mindset and a future mindset. And I'm sure you've all heard of growth mindsets ad infinitum before as well. The last art is the art of service, and that's connecting your why to others and amplifying what you do. And it's about working in collaboration with others rather than feeling like you need to compete all the time. And it's about making deep connections, both broadly, well, deeply and broadly, so that the dreams that you have ride with the dreams of others, and together, bigger and greater and better things can happen. So you might be wondering why I came up with these arts. Well, in part, as I said, it's the journey that I have travelled, and in part, it's all those glasses of wines with girlfriends, and it's some of the research and surveys I've done with some of my clients. And what they have told me, and probably some of the things that you can really resonate with, is that women want more clarity in life. They want to understand and know what it is they want to do, because otherwise they don't feel like they can take action and be focused and motivated. And that's perfectly true. If you aren't clear about where you're headed, how the hell can you get there? The second thing women said to me was they want more confidence. They want confidence to be themselves. They want confidence to share their authenticity without worrying what other people think. The third thing they wanted, everybody wants this, balance. Does everybody want balance? Yeah, everybody asks for balance. But really, I think what they were wanting is enough space in their life to feel like they could get to a sweet spot where there would be some time for them, some time for their family, some time for their jobs, and a little bit less chaos, probably. And the other thing that women said to me was they wanted more meaning in life. They wanted to be able to feel like what they did brought meaning to other women or other people, and they wanted to feel like they had a meaningful life. They also, one young lady told me that she wanted to feel alive. And I equate that to reaching your highest potential. That's the YHP. And if you haven't guessed by now, yes, I used to work in government, and acronyms are my thing. So, before I wrap up, I have some key takeaways that I would like to give you quickly. Firstly, the personal business connection alignment is really important. You can't take one from the other. It's really important to, when you're thinking about your why and what you stand for, that these two can connect. Secondly, find the gold. Now that's where I talked about looking back to your past, looking back to who you were, the things that made you who you were, and finding the gold in them to take forward and tell your story and tell your journey. Number 3 is an exercise I do called Your Future Backwards. And that's very much about visioning that future, really being able to see it, and then figuring out what you're going to do to get there. But rather than getting caught up in the how, which is going to diminish your dream somewhat, because sometimes we have no idea of the how. Number 4 is speak up even if your knees shake. Number 5 is embrace learning and think boldly. And we all do a lot of learning. We all have lots of great ideas. Don't stop. Don't apologise for that. But for God's sake, Do something about what you've learnt and those ideas that you've had. Number 6 is connect deeply and broadly. And that, I guess, is looking around you while you're here today and tomorrow and really talking to people and finding out a little bit more about them. Because you may not always know what the connection is going to lead to, but connect just to be connected. So there I was sitting across from my doctor's office, or from my doctor's desk rather. And she looked at me and said, "You've got breast cancer." And I have to say, that's the trifecta of 2014 for me. And 4 or so years later, half a dozen operations, I can honestly say I'm thankful for that wake-up call, because I really wasn't looking after myself. But the thing I want to impart about that experience is that we all have transition points in life, whether it is divorce, whether it is breast cancer, whether it's another type of cancer, whether it's your parents dying. The thing is, and I know this for absolute sure, if you look after yourself and if you're more intentional in your life, one, you may not have to have that. You may not need to get to that transition point, particularly if it's around your health. And 2, if you do, you'll be better placed to manage it. And then I was at the School of Philosophy and looking for answers. And the answers didn't actually come from the course. They came from a guy I met in the break who told me, and this is back in 1997, he told me he was a futurist. Now, I don't think they existed back then. And I said, okay, what's a futurist? This sounds a bit interesting. He said, Ingrid, he worked for Telstra. He said, I look forward to 2020. True story. And what I'm looking at is what we want the world to look like now in 2020 and what the technology might look like. And then I start thinking about how we start now to get where we're going. That blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. To think that I could think about my future, that it could be anything that I wanted it to be, and then I could go forward and search for it and look at and get there. And that's one of the things that's driven me probably throughout most of my life. And I reflect on the decision points I've made, even looking back without realising it. Those are the things, that core, and you'll see if you look at my banner downstairs, endless possibilities, reimagining your future, has driven me my entire life. And so these days, I'm proud to call myself a life designer and futurist. I work with women, engaging them in possibility, helping them reimagine their future, and getting really intentional. And it's my intention with that less and less women will become a statistic. And I gave you those tough statistics earlier because I reflected that women in small business are probably fairly high risk, because lots of us, when we start out, we bootstrap it. We don't have a lot behind us. We learn as we go, and that is awesome and amazing. But it puts our eye off the ball of the long game. And I really want you to, if there's one thing to take away from that, to what I say today, that's the thing. Don't forget there's a long game as well. And I'd like to wrap by sharing my purpose with you, because it enshrines the arts that I've just talked about very briefly, and what drives me to my highest potential. And it's been refined over the years, and this is a new refinement, and I have to say I haven't shared it with anyone yet. And my knees probably will shake because it's very personal to me. But I wouldn't ask you to do something with conviction if I wasn't prepared to do it myself. So here goes. I might have a sip of water though. Thanks. My ambition is to deeply impact 40 women every year, to live intentionally, to reimagine their future, speak up and be change makers through the magic of their connection with other women. Every woman I work with, I ask to look at impacting 10 other women through their own journey and to pay it forward. Knowing that for every idea shared, for every connection we make, we can dream bigger than we can ever dream alone. In 1 year, I know if I can inspire 40 women, we can collectively positively impact 4,000. In 2 years, 400,000. And homelessness and domestic violence and lack of gender equity can be part of our past, not our future. My name's Ingrid. Thank you for letting me share my journey today. If you've got any questions, and there's some details to find me later. I'm down at the booth downstairs. I have a copy of my infographic and some beautiful postcards to send to you if you're interested. There's a QR code downstairs and online. But yeah, any questions, feel free.
Wasn't that an excellent speech? Thank you, Ingrid, very much. All right, anybody needs to change rooms? Couple leaving us. The other one had finished. Okay, I'll just give it 2 seconds for the people from downstairs to come up because I do know they finished slightly early. So let's give it a second. They should be here. Alrighty, let's get going. So now I'd like to introduce you to Bec Tucker, who's going to do how to do PR well for small business. Something very useful. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi everyone. So I'm probably going a bit more now towards the practical, get your notebooks out, write down some tips and tricks side of things. So my background is I've recently moved into the agency world. I was previously in corporate, and my husband and I also have a small business. So I'm very familiar with the pitfalls and the stress of small business and trying to keep all the balls in the air. In agency land, I work with small and large businesses, helping them basically tell their story and get their message out there. So PR is something that it's one element, I suppose, of what we do. It's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Now, let's hope I've got the right way. Yep. So what we're going to talk about, what public relations is, how to, I suppose, some tips for how to define your business story, and pitching and what it is, and the PR basics around pitching and getting your story in. As I think it was Brooke said it this morning, that, you don't need a PR agency to pitch a story these days. They've all got their Twitter handles up for you. You can go on there and have a crack at pitching it yourself. So those barriers where you used to have to use an agency, they don't really exist anymore. My boss would probably not agree with that, but it's true. You're welcome to jump in on their DMs and have a go at pitching your own angles. So we're going to talk about some of those sides of things. And what media pitching is, how to do it, and the basics of how to get it right. So before I kind of get started, let's get a bit of a lay on the room. Has anyone written their own press release? You put your hand up if you have. Yeah, okay. Has anyone participated in media interviews themselves with a journalist? Put your hand up. Yeah. More than once? Keep your hand up. All right. Yeah. And anyone spoken on radio or TV before? Okay, we've got a couple. Hello. All right. That's good. That helps me kind of know how deep to go. All right, so PR really is just storytelling for brands. That's all it is at the end of the day. It's about finding your story, telling it to people and organisations that matter for you and your business. It used to be that there was a big difference, and there was that really distinct line separating PR from communications. But for the most part, when people talked about PR, it meant that they were talking about media coverage and, generally speaking, things that they didn't have to pay for. So advertising is that traditional, you've got to pay for it, the paid editorial as well. PR is when you've basically, it's still true-ish, but in a nutshell, PR is when you've managed to convince someone that your story is that strong that they're willing to run it without having to be paid to do it. So they believe in your business, your story, and what you're trying to tell enough to share it for you. So amplifying your message. So some terms that are important to know. I'm not sure which one's working here. Some terms that are important to know. Earned media. So these are the channels where you've managed to convince someone to cover that story for you. It's when this is kind of where that media pitching does come in, and we'll talk a bit more about that a bit further on. Then you've got your owned channels. So these are the channels that you own and completely control. So these are your website, your newsletters, your social media. Debatable whether you actually own it, but at the end of the day, you've created it and you're kind of crafting it. So we classify it as owned for now. And then there's paid. So this is your purely your advertising channels. There's a bit of a blur between paid and owned these days because you can pay for advertising on your social channels. So I suppose the owned angle has become a little bit more skewed towards paid online social advertising. So for the most part, PR is going to sit in that earned channel. So it's media like your news articles, radio interviews that you've secured, TV spots, podcasts, and even other people's blogs and their newsletters. Now, where PR fits into this landscape, because it should only be one little part that you're thinking of, a much broader picture. So if you have a look at the slide, you can see that PR really is, it's the central part for your bigger picture. It's not the whole part, but it is really important, and it's the reason why we see it as so important is because it gives you that credibility factor. And that's where you build that trust. That's how you get buy-in with people, and you become that gravitas sort of personality in a room. You can't pay for PR coverage, despite what some editors might tell you, or advertising execs. But you can pay someone to help you obviously find and tell your story, but there's also no guarantee that it'll be used. So that's exactly why it's so valuable. Because if it's covered, it really does mean that someone completely independent from you saw that value in what you wanted to say and the story that you're trying to tell. And in communications, that's the golden nugget that we're all searching for. And you got to try and find it all the time. And the news cycle moves so quickly that once you find it, you've got to still be looking for the next one as well. And so when you do get that coverage, the other advantage is that you can then use it in your other channels. So you can repurpose that content and share it elsewhere. It can amplify that message for you. So let's have a look at some of the things that, make news and that really do get you some PR. So when you do try to go to a publication or an outlet to cover your story, it's not enough for you to tell them the story that matters for you. They're interested in what matters to their audience. So the audiences differ for every publication, even ones that are competing with each other. They have different slight tweaks and differences in their audiences, whether it's geographic locations, the types of publications, where they're located, why they cover it, who the journalists are and what their agendas are. So there's a lot of categories of stories listed here that are among the standard fare, I guess, for media. But like I said, they're not all relevant to every outlet and they're not all relevant to you. So you've got to really hone in on your story, your purpose, and where you can find a niche that's going to really hit that mark. So some of the things that make news, a special event. So for your local media outlets who you're looking for, have you got a store that you're opening? They're likely to cover that because it benefits their local marketplace who are reading and looking for something to do on the weekend. You might have a great opening for them to go to. That's a good news story for them. That's probably not going to work for the Daily Telegraph though. Novelty and humour. So my husband and I have a plumbing company. If we could get some stats during COVID and the crazy toilet paper debacle, if we were able to link sewer blockages with the suburbs that were having the greatest crisis with plumbing shortages and toilet paper, like that would have been a humorous news angle that we probably could have got a story out of. Whether that aligns to our brand, different story, but these are the sorts of things that you would look at, you assess whether you want to go down that path and pursue. Latest research and innovation, oh my God, data. Journos love data. So if you can come up with anything that's backed up with a stat, you've straight away got a really good opportunity for credibility. You've got to find data that matters though. So yeah, it's a big one. Latest stats, research, they're always a really good news hook and they've got to be tied to a really good insight. Well-known people, this one's probably a bit trickier when you're in small business if we're honest, but don't think about celebrities, think about well-known locals, politicians. Politicians will often turn up to the opening of an envelope. So, if you can get them on site, you're going to get some publicity from that as well. So looking at that, getting overseas visitors or experts that you might have in your industry that you can lure onto your site or get them to mention you or tag you into something. So those are some ideas that you can look at as well. The future, talking about futurists, a future announcement that might impact a local economy or a global economy, or can you see something that's coming that people aren't talking about yet? Start talking about it and push a agenda, even if you're wrong. It's fine to start a conversation and get people talking about it and sharing. Money and finance, so anything that's kind of injecting money into the economy or community as well is always well received, and yeah, everyone loves reading an article about a government grant and things like that. So same sort of angle as well. And then the hardship and solutions angle. So beyond that financial element, does your product or service really solve a problem for your marketplace? Now, I'm not just talking about someone who can get you a loan to get you out of trouble, but it's more, what's the deeper root of a problem that your product or service is able to solve? Educate the journalists on that problem and then how you're able to solve that. All right. So you've found the media angle or the media that you want to target. You know what kind of story they like, and what are you going to do next? So this is where you've got to get your ducks in a row. These are the assets and the elements that you need to start thinking about. You need to understand what the point is that you want to make, how you can back it up, how to then make it different from all your competitors that are maybe trying to say the same thing. Be very clear on your purpose. Plenty of people have talked about purpose, so be very, very clear on your purpose and what it is that makes you different. So if you're an accounting firm, what makes you different from others? Because let's face it, at the end of the day, accounting firm's an accounting firm. You're there to get your tax done or whatever. So what makes you a different accounting firm to your competing accounting firms? Who's the key spokesperson? Don't be afraid to not have it be you. Just because you're the business owner doesn't mean that you need to be the spokesperson. If you're not comfortable or confident, find someone in your team who's got that same passion and can talk for you. So you just need to find someone who's the subject matter expert on that area or topic that you're presenting about. And risk management. So be careful when you put your head above water, you're going to get noticed, so be prepared for it. What could go wrong? You need to play that devil's advocate a little bit and think about what might happen. Now, so what's what's your story? What I'd like us to do is something just a little bit practical. With the person that's sitting next to you, tell them your story, any story, something that's happening in your business right now, not necessarily about your business, just a story of your business. So a exciting customer that you've just had join you, or a target market that you're trying to break into, or anything. Maybe a really interesting statistic. Did you know 20% of our clients found us this month through social media posts that we put out? Whatever it is, I want you to spend 30 seconds, just talk to the person next to you and tell your story. All right, we should be on to the second person telling their story. All right, time's up. So, what you just had happen then was a tiny glimpse into the world of pitching. It's that you've got 30 seconds to just really grab their attention and get them interested in something. And sometimes you might have had a look at what a journalist is potentially writing about, and you're trying to use that as a little bit of a hook to get in and then weave your other message in there, but they answer the phone a slightly different way to what you thought, and all of a sudden your pitching strategy turns around, and you've got to come up with something totally different. So here's some tips for when it comes to that world of pitching. So to get your story into the right hands and hopefully get that coverage that you want, these are a few of the ways that you can do it. Pre-COVID, you could have done a media event. That's still happening, and there's still... actually, we've got a media event happening in Brisbane in early March, and there's a lot of media events starting to emerge again now with International Women's Day. So it's starting to come back. What's a media event? So where you invite the journalist to come to an announcement or to something that you're displaying or showing, or it might be an online media event as well. So you can be having a webinar where you might be offering an exclusive insight or demonstration. That's one thing that you can do, a media event. And that means you're kind of holding back on your actual media announcement to force them to attend and get the exclusive insight that way. You want to get pictures and videos. Now, a journalist... Funnily enough, as much as journalists are all about the words, they actually want the pictures and video so much more than they want the words as well. Video content is king at the moment, so you see it on your Instagram. Everything's visual these days, so try your best to have really good accompanying assets to go with your story that you're pitching out. Journalists love it when they hear that. Oh yeah, I've got some photography or some B-roll footage that you could use if you choose to run the story. You want them to be eye-catching, not too salesy, not with your logo blazoned right in the background. You make it genuine and authentic. Media releases. So this is your actual story. You do need to have a media release of some description. It can be as broad and detailed, or it can be quite high level, and it could be talking points that you're trying to co-create a story with a journalist. So don't be put off if you don't know how to write a media release, because sometimes you don't need to have the fully fleshed out bit of information, because at the end of the day you're pitching the story, and the journalist can help you co-create that story. Interview. So if you manage to secure yourself a interview, that's when they know the angle, so you know what you're going to get talked. You know what you're discussing. So make sure you've got some really good briefing notes for yourself to refer back to. If there's stats that you're going to use, don't make them up in the moment. Have them in front of you. It's fine to take notes into an interview, whether it's an in-person interview or over the phone. That's not a problem. Make sure you've got some good notes to help yourself through, and don't be afraid to say, "I don't know. I'll get back to you." That's fine. Never fake it. If you don't know an answer in an interview, that's fine. Journalists get it. They understand that even if you are a subject matter expert, you can't always be on and you can't always know the answer. And then, there's the pitching call. Once you've got all of those elements together, you're ready to pick up the phone. You know that you've got plenty of meaty information that you can hand over to a journalist comfortably and confident that if they're ready to go tomorrow, you've got it all ready for them. And when you do the pitching call as well, it is helpful to have a short script for yourself. Don't follow a script. Unfortunately, I've got a bit of a script here, which is kind of throwing me off even. But it is helpful to have a script, to have those talking points to keep yourself focused as well, especially if it's your first time. So you've scored yourself an interview. Sometimes you get lucky and you send a media release and they just run it, but it doesn't seem to happen as much anymore. That used to be the way of PR. You'd kind of send your media release and they'd run it. And in trade media, it kind of still works that way a little bit. But in all those other spaces, Mamma Mia and all of those areas that we're looking at now, and trying to get in podcasts and things like that, you generally end up landing with an interview. So these are a few of the steps to really be across and be comfortable with. So you want to be prepared. Like I said, don't speculate. If you don't know an answer, just own it and be fine with it. That's not a problem. Be on point, know your key messages, so have that briefing doc ready to go. Be positive and enthusiastic. Like, your story's been picked up, it's fantastic. So someone else sees the value in what you've pitched, that's great. So feel good about it. Treat the interviewer with respect. There is nothing worse than getting an interview, and this happens sometimes with our clients, and it used to happen in corporate. I'd get an interview, we'd book it in, and then the guy that was supposed to be running in the interviews, got a meeting that clashes, and they stuff them around, or they say they're going to get, some data over to them, and then they don't bother following up with an email. So respect the fact that journalist has got a deadline that they need to meet. They've given you their time. They're going to run your story. Treat them with respect. Keep a customer focus. So not a sales focus, but a customer focus. What is it in this angle that the journalist has seen that is going to benefit your customer that you're hoping to attract? So always keep that at the front of your mind. If anything comes up that you're like, oh yeah, that's a bit of an industry joke, or refute it. Don't let these things bubble away and fester. If there's some gossip or there's something, refute it. Make sure you stamp it out straight away. That's your chance to do your part, I suppose, in social activism, I guess, and make sure you do the right thing. Don't say anything off the record, because it's never actually off the record. It might not get published, but it will get spoken about later on. So, don't ever say and presume that it is actually off the record. And if you don't know, say so, and be quick to then follow up. If you said that you're going to get something over to them, send it over to them and give them a time commitment, because journalists are all about deadlines. So, in a nutshell, we want to make sure we've done our research. You've got a compelling story to tell. You want to choose that right media, hone your skills, practice makes perfect, and ask for help when you need it. Don't be afraid to, bring in the cavalry if you have to. And then, from a small business viewpoint, one of the things I suppose that we recognised at my organisation is sometimes you don't want a big PR agency. We're expensive, I'm not going to lie. It's about just sometimes having access to that skill set. So we've just launched a new program that we're starting off next month called Comms Call. So if that's something of interest to you, it will normally be $99 per month for 6 months, but my boss has graciously let me discount it for women with altitude to $35 per month for 6 months. So it's a 1 hour a month meeting where you can send things ahead of time, we can proofread them for you, give you tips and advice, and each session will sort of run with a theme. So that's something that we're working on at the moment. If you're interested, feel free to reach out. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you. Yes?
Can I just ask you, in regarding to actual portrait media, would you actually normally approach, say for example, newsletter, would you approach the editor or the actual reporter?
Sorry, the editor or?
Or the reporter?
It depends on the publication. You could do both. It depends on. Often we might start with the editor because there might be multiple journalists and we don't know which journalists are on what stories. So sometimes you start with the editor because they're kind of planning the magazine or the publication or the newsletter out. But it really depends. If we can see on Twitter that a journalist is talking about something that's relating to what the angle is that we're trying to pitch, we might go straight to the journalist. Sometimes we do both. If we're not getting traction with one, we switch and we go to the other one because they're not always talking to each other. So yeah, it really does depend. But this is where you do need to do your research and make sure before you even pick up the phone call, just because you know that they're a journalist that might cover, I don't know, the energy industry, don't presume that they're interested in your story. Have a look, do some research on what they're currently talking about. They might have just done a story that almost covers what you're trying to pitch, so you've already been scooped, so no point starting there. But maybe talk to the editor, and the editor might then have an angle that you can go in a week's time on something that aligns with it or something similar. So, yeah.
I'm curious to know about people who do regular columns in a newspaper.
Yeah.
How does one go about that? And then if you do land that opportunity, are you dictated to as to what to talk about, or is that?
It really depends on the publication and the type of audience that it's got, and the remit. A lot of columns are paid for, so it depends on the. Yeah, so in local papers, a lot of those are paid opportunities, like as in they're paid opportunities, paid advertorial, and they're positioned as a column. Your article of like Mia Friedman in whatever, the Telegraph or anything like that, they're not paid. They're genuine secured opportunities. It does take a lot of long-term and credibility to sort of get yourself into that space where you do get a column. Usually you can't just write what you want. It will kind of be semi-dictated. It's got to align with where the editor's direction is that they're going, or for that section, what they're hoping to do and how it's going to be laid up, what's going to be on the page complementing it. Yeah, they'll have a theme that they're kind of working with, yeah.
Can you comment on source bottle and whether it's worth?
Yeah. It used to be something that was used quite a bit. There's no harm in staying on the source bottle list, absolutely. It's probably not as strong as it once was, and it's very competitive in that space. So when the opportunities come up, this is where it's that respect the deadline. If an opportunity comes up, you've got to respond straight away because there's like 30, 40, 50, sometimes 150 other people responding to those opportunities. So as a PR agency, we don't really use source bottle anymore. We've got some other avenues that I suppose we keep an eye on, and we're paying as a PR agency to be involved in. So things like telemedia, and they've got news feeds that we pay to be a part of where we get exclusivity. And that's really only going out to PR agencies. It's not kind of going into small business, but yeah, it's definitely worth it if you're trying to chase PR, which I think you should be, because like I said, it's that it builds a real credibility factor for you. Source bottle's a great place to definitely start, and also really good to build connections with journalists, because that's the other thing. You want to get in with a journalist, get them to know you well enough and respect you as a source that they'll come to you before they even start trying to find a source. That's the real gold. Any other questions? Yeah.
But with so much sort of sharing of posts and information and things, sort of attribution and credit tends to fall away sometimes.
Yes.
Can you comment on that, and the rigour with which small organisations should pay attention to where their information is coming from?
As in when you're sharing content, making sure you're attributing it correctly? Yeah.
An amalgam of lots of things you've read and heard.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Yeah, it is hard. And look, generally the media, they want to do the right thing and they do want to source and credit people wherever it's possible. So if you ever get mentioned but you're not tagged or attributed correctly, or you've been taken out of context, generally you can reach out to the journalist and just say, oh look, I didn't actually say that, or that's not the right medium, or that wasn't quite the name of the publication that we might have produced that you're trying to take a quote from. You can do that, and if you've got handles and things like that you want tagged, is that sort of what you're referring to as well?
It's mostly just avoiding voice plagiarism, I suppose, as an individual.
Okay.
How much you should acknowledge
Yep.
your own kind of
Credit when you're taking someone else's idea and kind of curating. I think, okay. So, this is a hard one, because you also don't want to be that person that goes, hey, that was my idea, I said that first, you're just copying me. So I think I don't have a perfect answer for that, if I'm honest. I really don't, because it kind of depends on each unique situation. I think whenever you share anything, you should be sharing directly from the page, wherever possible, all the time. I think there's no harm with acknowledging where inspiration has come from. And I actually think there's nothing more flattering than doing that to people, and that's how you do build credibility and build really solid connections. So that whole collaboration versus competition thing is 100% on the money. There's nothing wrong with sharing a competitor's piece of content if it sends the right message and is on brand for you. There's no harm in doing it, and doing it respectfully. You're not trying to take their customers at the end of the day. They've got a good message. There's no point reinventing the wheel. So sharing it and helping push and amplify that message. It does, yeah. 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 I think as well, it does depend on the medium. Social media, it's tricky because, people are stripping content where they can and taking things out of context and sharing it and not saying where the originating source came from. I think media are a lot more diligent with it. So anyway, no worries. Thank you. Thanks, guys.